Hello and welcome to the Leading Lounge. I'm your host, Dr. Justin Dubose. Here in the Leading Lounge, we talk with today's leaders and unpack lessons learned and being learned from a career of leading and communicating in their field. These conversations are designed to be both informal and informative, and we want to equip you with wisdom and tools to empower you as a leader where you are and where you want to be. Hey everybody, welcome to our next Leadership Tips, Tricks, and Tools episode here on the Leading Lounge. I hope these have been a blessing to you. A lot of practical advice, a lot of good wisdom coming from this book. So the book that I'm following is called The Leadership Challenge. You can get it on Amazon, and I've put for each one of these episodes, the link is in the show notes or the description if you'll look there. But I'm particularly excited about this week because we get into the first of the 5 practices. So the book takes literally leadership practices, 5 practices that if you want to build a healthy leadership, effective leadership, if you want to, as the tagline of the book says, make extraordinary things happen in organizations, they give you 5 practices, right, that any of us can do. And this is the first practice. So each practice covers 2 chapters. So each practice is going to cover 2 episodes of the podcast. But this one is called Modeling the Way. It's the very first practice they give you is model the way. How do you visibly demonstrate the leadership that you're asking of others and calling others to? And the first step they give you is clarifying values, right? Clarifying the values for your organization. And I think it's easy. It's an easy thing to overlook in terms of setting the culture and letting your people know what you expect of them. And you can just kind of run over it because it feels like you're not accomplishing tasks. You're not, knocking out objectives. And so you can not take the time to do that. However, I hope you will see as we go through this particular episode and talk about it, the value in it. So I'm going to start by telling you a story. So I led an organization before in my past. And when I got there, and I was young for what I was doing. So everyone that I'm going to talk about in this scenario was older than me. But when I got there, I asked them a very simple question, which is, who are we and what are we about? As an organization, who are we and what are we about? And there was about 8 to 10 people around the table with me. And would you believe that every single person gave a different answer to the question, who are we and what are we about? Which I found interesting is that, okay, wait, there's not even uniformity on the very basic questions, who are we? You would think that we're kind of the leaders in the room around the table have a similar answer, and they were similar, but they weren't the same. And well, what are we all about? We're not even there. So by the time you get to talking practicalities, how do you implement this and the strategies and all that, you're not on the same page because you don't even agree beforehand about who are we? What are the values of our organization? What are we doing and what are we trying to do? And what's our purpose and all that kind of thing. So there was no uniformity of answers in the question having to do with who are we? What do we value? What's our purpose? What's our mission? There was different understandings of that from everyone around the table. So when that happens, and those may be good questions to ask in your organization, and that's how chapter 3 starts out here is who are you? Just asking who are you and what are you about and what do we value, you might find out that there's not even similar answers when you ask that question. And that'll highlight for you, gosh, we really need to clarify our values here to determine who we are and to determine what we're all about. Because we can't even begin to talk about strategies for fulfilling our purpose and our mission and sticking to our values if we don't have any concept of what our values are. I wanted to highlight for you, there's a particular phrase, it's on page 65 of the book in this chapter. This says, forge unity, don't force it, right? So forge, don't force. So let's shift gears and talk about the practical aspects of actually clarifying your values. And for some of us, establishing those values. What are they? How do we establish them? One temptation leaders face is to just outline them themselves and to say, this is who we are and this is what we're about. And we don't get any buy-in. We don't get other people to participate in the process. I think that one of the reasons we don't do that is because A, it's easier to do it ourselves. We don't have to talk to anybody else about it. And I think the other reason is it's faster if we do it ourselves. It's more efficient if we do it ourselves, right? But we don't get any buy-in. And so we can be saying as leaders, this is what we're about. And actually, no, it's not. Like, this is important to me, but this is important to anyone else in the room, which is exactly what happened in my scenario. Is people's values were really important to them and they were fighting for those values, but everybody's values were different. And so then what happened is values began to compete when you start talking about implementing a strategy or a process, or how things fit together, procedures. Well, people are arguing from different value perspectives, and so now they're fighting about things because we don't even hold the same value. So one of the things in clarifying values is forge them, do not force them, right? Get some buy-in from your people. Involve your team in the process. Like, let the values that you establish together be yours together. Let them be forged together by inviting and including input from your team, even if it slows the process down, because it will slow the process down, and it's a good thing to slow the process down, because then you're giving people time. You get in your early adopters, but you also got kind of your stragglers and those who doubt, and then you're going to have those who are late adopters, but you give them all time to go, okay, I think I'm in. Or you give them time to really wrestle with it and decide that they're not in, that actually they're out. These aren't my values. I had a different organization that I was running. I spent a lot of time talking publicly about our values. What are our core values that we believe in? And I ended up having kind of a key shareholder opt out of the organization who had been in for a while, because he was like, you know what? I don't think I actually agree with these values. And I found that to be a perfectly legitimate reason to go, hey, that's great. Like, we're all on the same page and you're not, and that's okay. That's okay. So go ahead. It'll be better for you. It'll be better for us to go ahead and separate and part ways. So forge your values, don't force your values. And what'll happen when you do that is you'll get greater buy-in. The first organization I mentioned that I was a part of, what happened was one of the key leaders, the guy who was in a pretty significant position of leadership, he was preaching values that were his values, but none of his people agreed with them. It was sort of like coming in and being like, our values are hard work and efficiency. And you're going, that's not my value. Like, that's not why I'm here. I'm here for a totally different purpose. And if we're all about hard work and efficiency, then I don't want to be a part of it. That's not appealing to me. And which is exactly what he was doing. He was forcing his values on his team rather than inviting them to speak into those values and let that conversation and that dialogue over a period of time shape who they are, who we are, why are we here? And then there's a sense of ownership instead of just kind of a renter mentality. It's like, well, I just show up, somebody else takes care of it. This is not my place. I'm just here for a little while. But you have an owner's mentality of, no, this is ours. This is mine. I have to take care of it. I have to steward it well. So as far as expressing those things, right? So remember, forge, don't force. Forge those values together. Invite people to be a part of the process. Even if it slows it down, let them be a part of it. So I want to end all these tips, tricks, and tools episodes by looking at some of the practical ways in the book that the authors talk about. What do you do here, right? So number one, this is on page 70, where it says, modeling the way begins with clarifying values. Find your voice and affirm shared values. This means that you must, here's the practices to model the way in clarifying your values. The very first one is identify the values you use to guide choices and decisions. Identify your own values. My wife had asked me, hey, let's come up with some values we have as a family so that we can teach them to our kids. We can hang them up over our dining room table and we can share them with our kids. Well, I did, but it took me like 10 years to really settle on some good ones, and you may not have that much time, because you're in this position and you kind of need to clarify those things sooner. But identify your own values. What are my values? What am I about? Why am I here? What are the kind of the guiding principles that help me make decisions, that help guide my choices? And that'll begin to, as you share that with people, that will begin to help them understand you and you can then start to find some common ground. So right after that, number 2 is find your own authentic way of talking about what's important to you, right? Don't feel like you have to talk about it as if you're me or someone else. Talk about it in third person or in generalities. Find your authentic way of talking about what you value. You can't do that, though, until you identify what you value. So spend some time really reflecting deeply on that. And that way, when you sit down with someone, it's really an act of kindness and humility towards them to say, I just want to share with you real quick who I am, what I'm all about, why I'm here. And you talk about it in a way that's authentic and genuine to who you are. Then they'll begin to see you as a person, and they'll want to follow you, right? They won't feel compelled because of your position, but they'll go, oh, I understand Justin so much more after we had this conversation. So find your own authentic way of talking about it. And that will begin to shape and lay the groundwork for the conversations you have to forge values together, right? So identify your own values and find some authentic ways to express what that means to you, what's important to you. Why does this matter? Why is this so central to who I am as a person? And then when it comes to corporate values, number 3 there is help others to articulate why they do what they do and what they care about. You model the way by sharing your own values and what's important to you. And then make sure you take time to listen and engage with them and help them articulate it. They may not have thought about it either. So sit down and help them articulate those thoughts, those values, those core principles that they have, who they are, what they care about, why they're here. When you do that, you can then begin to identify some commonalities. Hey, you know what? I think we have this thing in common. I think that we can begin to then build some consensus around values and principles and standards. That's number 5 on page 70 in this chapter. But you can identify, you know what, this is important to me and this is important to you too. So let's start there. We have this in common. We have these shared principles, these shared beliefs, these shared values. And as you have that conversation with all of your team, what you're going to find is that we do have these certain things in common. It may be 2, it may be 3, it may be 7, but we have these core principles and values in common. And then once you get those laid out and really nailed down and articulated well, then the last step here is hold people accountable. Make sure people agree to them, and then hold them accountable to those agreed upon values and standards. And once you do those things, now you're on your way, right? So your whole accountability structure and your systems and your processes is not built around something that you're imposing on people. It's built on something that was forged together in authentic dialogue and conversation, where we both got to share about who we are and why we are this way and what's important to me and what's valuable to me. And now that forms the basis of how we hold one another accountable. So I want to hold you accountable to A, B, and C, but the reason is because it's these values, because we talked about this and we have these things in common. And we all agreed that this is important enough to us to make a core part of how we operate, because it's who we are and it's why we're here and it's what we're all about. So as a follow-up, I like to leave you with a follow-up every time. Easy follow-up is you can go to the website, Communicate to Care, and you can shoot me a message, and I'd love to talk with you about this. How do you do this? Help you think through that and process through that. You can also like and subscribe to the Leading Lounge podcast, either here on YouTube or on iTunes or wherever it is you listen or watch. You can subscribe to that, and you'll get notified. These come out twice a month, one interview and one of these leadership tips, tricks, and tools. And those by themselves will be helpful. A lot of times they're great starting points to start these conversations. I also have 2 products and services that I've created for clients that I think you'll find much value in. One of them is Drive Core Values Training, right? So we take your core values, which we can also help you identify what those are through these kinds of dialogues and conversations, and put together some training where you begin to drive from your core values, right? And so that can be as short as one day where we get your team together, or a multi-day training event, but where we begin to get on the same page with what our core values are and drive together from those, right? So we forge them together. We take the time to forge them, just like we talked about. And the other is, there's another tool called Accountability in Action. And it's 5 steps of accountability. And it's a booklet. It's a booklet that you get for your team, an ebook. And it also comes with some training videos with the option of some on-site training or some coaching for you and your team. If you've got the core values, but man, you're just struggling with holding people accountable to them, to sticking to that, then there's a tool for that. There's a product and a service for that. So, but I hope this is helpful. You can go back and listen to previous episodes for these leadership tips, tricks, and tools. They're all, again, out of this book, which I highly, highly recommend. I've used it in my university classes I teach on leadership and communication. I've built some leadership development training for the Texas Rangers baseball team based on this book. It's really solid. I love it, and I think it's incredibly valuable. So if I can help you with any of that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. But continue to listen. There'll be another one of these next month where we look at the second part of modeling the way as a leader and how you can do that and why it's so very important. So God bless you in your leadership and in the good work you do. I appreciate you joining me for this episode, and I'll see you next time.